Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we will be taking a look at the fascinating journey of blood flow through the heart. More specifically, we will be looking at the four main chambers of the heart, the basic foundational anatomy, and the blood passage. Let's get started. So, the four main chambers of the heart are the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle. These four main chambers serve the most important role as they are the basics of the heart. So, there's actually a little key at the bottom right to help you better navigate the image. These chambers are what the blood passes through, and so it's the basic foundational anatomy of the heart. So, you might be wondering, well, why is the right atrium and right ventricle on the left side of this image, and then the left atrium and left ventricle on the right side? Well, something interesting about medical diagrams is that they're not drawn from the viewer's perspective, but rather from the patient's perspective, so to say, because your right side is going to be your patient's left side and vice versa. So when you're really looking at the diagram, it's as if you're looking at an actual patient or like their heart, rather than the diagram being from the observer's viewpoint. First off, deoxygenated blood flows into the right atrium from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which is shown here as SVC and IVC. The superior vena cava is responsible for bringing in deoxygenated blood from the upper parts of the body, which include the head, neck, shoulders, arms, and upper chest. On the other hand, the inferior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood from the lower parts of the body, including feet, legs, lower thorax, abdominal area, etc. These two veins serve as the entrance points to the right atrium. It's important to remember that the blood here is deoxygenated, meaning it already delivered oxygen to the tissues and is now carrying carbon dioxide and other waste products back to the heart. Next off, from the right atrium, blood moves through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The tricuspid valve is named for its three cusps, or another word for cusps is flaps. The term tricuspid is composed of the words tri and cusp, tri meaning three and cusp referring to the flaps. These three flaps play a crucial role in preventing the backflow of blood into the atrium. When the right atrium contracts, the tricuspid valve opens, allowing blood to flow into the right ventricle. Once the right ventricle is full, the tricuspid valve closes to ensure that blood does not flow backward when the ventricle contracts. So, the job of the tricuspid valve, in simple terms, is to get the blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle and to prevent backflow so that the heart can function properly. And now, just so to reiterate, the blood goes into the right ventricle. And this chamber is responsible for pumping the deoxygenated blood towards the lungs. And so the walls of the right ventricle are muscular and strong enough to push the blood through the pulmonary circulation. And so the right ventricle's primary function is to ensure that the blood reaches the lungs, where it can be reoxygenated and go back to this process where it's delivered to the rest of the body. Next, the blood moves through the pulmonary valves into the pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary valve's function is much like the tricuspid valve's function and is similar in many ways. For example, it also has three cusps or flaps, just like the tricuspid valve. And its primary function is also to ensure that blood does not backflow from the pulmonary arteries back into the right ventricle. And so let's break down this word a little bit. So the word pulmonary means relating to the lungs. And so why this is important is because the pulmonary valve leads to the pulmonary arteries, as mentioned before, and the pulmonary arteries are connected to the lungs. So it's easy to remember that the main function of the pulmonary valve is to lead to these arteries, which lead to the lung, to start this process all over again. Now the blood is going to be carried into the pulmonary arteries, which is going to lead it to the lungs. It is important to note that both the right and left pulmonary arteries lead to the same destination, which is the lungs. The only difference is that the right pulmonary artery directs blood to the right lung, while the left pulmonary artery directs it to the left lung. Despite this separation, the ultimate goal is the same, and so do not let this confuse you because they are on different sides. They both have the same destination. So, a common misconception that people have is that veins carry deoxygenated blood and arteries carry oxygenated blood, right? The truth is, veins are defined by their function of carrying blood to the heart, whether it's oxygenated or not, and arteries are defined by their function of taking blood away from the heart. So, these definitions are there to explain whether that tube, let's just call it, is taking blood away from the heart or to the heart. It doesn't really matter whether this blood in the tube is oxygenated or not. If it's taking it away, it's an artery. If it's taking it to the heart, it's a vein. And so, an example of this is the pulmonary arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood away from the heart to the lungs, and the pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. So, despite their names, they do the opposite function of the misconception. So, just be careful of this. In the lungs, the deoxygenated blood picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. This process of gas exchange transforms the deoxygenated blood into oxygenated blood, which is essential for supplying our body's tissue with the oxygen that they need. And now the lungs send over oxygenated blood to the heart so that the heart can pump the oxygen to the rest of the body. Now the oxygenated blood comes from the lungs into the left atrium, and it does this through the pulmonary veins. So there are two sets of pulmonary veins. There are the left pulmonary veins and the right pulmonary veins. But the only difference is that they come from different lungs. Other than that, they serve the exact same function. And so let's break down the word pulmonary veins. Pulmonary means relating to the lungs, and veins means something that brings blood to the heart. So, pulmonary veins means that it brings the blood, the oxygenated blood, from the lungs to the heart. And so, these pulmonary veins, as mentioned before, are unique because veins are thought to carry deoxygenated blood, but this proves the case wrong. From the left atrium, blood flows through the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid valve. So if you break down the word bicuspid, just like we did tricuspid, you get bi and then you get cusp. So bi is a prefix meaning two, and then cusp is a word meaning flap. So we know now that the bicuspid valve has two flaps. So the reason for this is because structures that have two flaps, or valves that have two flaps, close tighter than valves that have three flaps. And you'll see the importance of this in the next slide. So the mitral slash bicuspid valve serves a similar function to the tricuspid and pulmonary valve, which is that it ensures that blood flows in one direction and it doesn't allow for backflow. Now the blood enters the left ventricle, and so the cool thing about this chamber is that it is the most powerful chamber in the heart because it has to pump this oxygenated blood all throughout the body. So logically, its tissue, its muscle is more thicker than that of the right ventricle. And so the left ventricle must generate a higher pressure compared to the right ventricle to ensure that this blood is reaching everywhere to all the tissues around the body. Next up, from the left ventricle, the blood is going to go through the aortic valve into the aorta, which is going to take all of this oxygenated blood and deliver it throughout the entire body. So this valve serves the same function as the other three. It just prevents backflow from the aorta into the left ventricle. So as you can see, the four valves of the heart serve very much similar functions. And now, finally, this blood is going to be pumped into the aorta where it will be delivered to the rest of the body. So, the aorta has an intricate anatomy, which I will be explaining in more detail on the next slide. But just some basics are the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the descending aorta. So, the ascending aorta is just the part of the aorta that's from the left ventricle to that top section over there. So, that part is going up, so we're going to call it the ascending aorta. The aortic arch is just like that arch section at the top where those three sections are coming out of it. That section is called the aortic arch, and then everything that goes down is called the descending aorta. The aorta has several key branches, including the brachiocephalic artery, which branches into the right common carotid artery and the right subclavian artery, and then the left common carotid artery and the left subclavian artery. So these branches at the top ensure that the oxygenated blood is reaching the head, neck, arms, and just like this top section of the body. And the part that's going down, the descending aorta, is ensuring that the blood distribution is making its way to the bottom half of the body as well. And so this is similar to the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava because the superior vena cava was bringing in all this deoxygenated blood from the top of the body, and inferior vena cava was bringing it in from the bottom of the body. So just like that, the aorta must make sure that this blood is being delivered to both the top and the bottom of the body. So this slide is just some key concepts and main points of this video, so you can just pause the video and read over. I would just like to thank the resources that made this video possible. I used canva.com to create this slideshow, Microsoft Clipchamp to edit this video, and thank you to Continental Hospitals for that image. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope this helped everyone understand anatomy a little bit better, and see you next time.